Welcome. Today we're standing on Harrison Street, and it's at this location that, during the late summer into the fall of 1988, scenes for Arthur Hiller's movie See No Evil, Hear No Evil were shot, starring two legendary comedic actors. So come along as we check out some of the locations on this adventure comedy movie from the 80s on this episode of Where'd They Film That? See No Evil, Hear No Evil is a 1989 film about two gentlemen who are disabled. Dave, played by Gene Wilder, who is deaf, and Wally, played by Richard Pryor, who is blind. And they get tangled up in a murder that takes place at their job. Now Dave and Wally are the prime suspects of the murder that took place. They're also being chased down by a couple of murderous thieves that are looking for a valuable coin that happens to be in Wally and Dave's possession. So now Wally and Dave need to stay alive long enough to clear their name as they take us on an adventure throughout New York City and its surrounding areas, while providing us with some laughs along the way. So while we go and check out some of the locations that are in the earlier part of the film, and we start off with the skyline in Lower Manhattan. As the opening credits begin to roll, we see a couple of shots of Lower Manhattan. This was taken on the Brooklyn side of the East River. We then get a shot of Lady Liberty in the distance, which was filmed in Battery Park. There were also shots of a few buildings in the surrounding area of the park. We then make our way up to the arch at Washington Square Park. As the opening sequence of the movie comes to a close, we end up in 42nd Street in Times Square. The quick tour of the city will eventually lead us to the first location I want to talk about, and that's going to be on West 22nd Street and Broadway. It's at this location where Dave and Wally inadvertently interact with each other before they ever met. So how the scene plays out is we see Dave walking down this block here, and as he approaches the corner, he is waiting for the light, but he doesn't realize he actually has the light to cross the street. What he also doesn't realize is he's standing a little bit too far in the street, which is blocking a truck from wanting to pass. The truck then passes and almost hits Dave, who has to jump out of its way. And as the truck is making the turn, Dave looks at him, and he's standing in the vicinity of the entrance of the train station. The truck driver then makes an obscene gesture towards Dave, which causes Dave to then respond by screaming back at him obscenities. It's at this point we see Wally and his sister walking towards the entrance of the train station to go and catch a train. Wally thinks Dave is talking to him and doesn't realize Dave has his back to him, but Wally still continues to make threats wanting to fight him as Dave begins to walk off. Most of the surrounding buildings and the area still pretty much looks the same from when it was filmed back in 1988, and it's pretty much still recognizable where you can match up the scenes. Our journey now takes us to 14th Street in Union Square, and it's at this location where Wally kindly helps a fellow blind man cross the street. Now the scene begins off the corner of 14th Street, and it's here where Wally's sister drops Wally off for a job interview. The car would stop around here, and after a brief conversation, Wally would convince his sister to allow him to walk into the job interview on his own without any assistance. Wally would then get out of the car around here and walk over to the corner and wait for the light to turn green. While Wally is waiting for the light to turn, a blind man approaches Wally asking him if he wouldn't mind helping him across the street. Wally kindly agrees to help out, and once the light turns, Wally then begins to guide the gentleman across the street. As the two guys continue walking across the street, you kind of see them walking outside of the crosswalk, and they ended up walking right onto one of those lifts that are on the back of delivery trucks. And they made it just in time. They were able to catch a ride on the lift. Similar to the last location we were at, not much has really changed over the past 35-40 years since this movie was filmed. And that seems to be a running theme with this filming location. There's going to be a lot of places that we visit today that look pretty similar to what they did when the movie was shot. We're now at 10 Union Square East, and it's at this location where both the interiors and exterior scenes of Wally and Dave's workplace were filmed. Now the exterior shots for this location were filmed at the curb here, and it would pretty much show the day-to-day activities of what Wally and Dave would do when it comes to running the newsstand shop. Now, as far as the interior shots that were filmed, those were pretty big scenes that helped move the story along. That was all shot in the interior of this location. Now this would be the third movie that Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder starred in together. The other two movies before it were Silver Streak in 1976, Stir Crazy in 1980, and they would also go on to make one more movie called Another You in 1991.
Does Dad know?
We're now at the 18th precinct on West 54th Street, and it's at this location where Wally and Dave were questioned by the cops and then eventually booked for the murder that happened at the newsstand. The filmmakers were not only able to get some exterior shots of the precinct, but they were also able to get some scenes filmed inside the precinct. At the time they were filming See No Evil, Hear No Evil, the precinct was going under renovation, so the city allowed them access to the interior of the precinct to film whatever scenes they needed to film. After ditching the detectives in an elevator, Wally and Dave were able to sneak out of the precinct, blending in with a bunch of protesters leaving out of these doors here. And after a brief exchange with a reporter, they would then make the turn into this alley next to the precinct. Now when they go in the alley, they'll duck into one of the abandoned buildings, and with some Hollywood magic, when they get out of the building, it'll be about 2-3 miles south of this current location. And that takes us to Harrison Street, and it's on this block, one of the buildings where Wally and Dave escape out of the basement. I do believe it is this building here where they escape. Now Wally and Dave would walk down this block and try and blend in as much as possible and not look like a couple of guys that were on the run from the cops. And as they're walking down the block, they would run into what they would soon realize be the real killers, Eve, played by Joan Severance, and Kingo, played by Kevin Spacey, in what I believe is one of his earlier roles. After Eve and Kingo get the valuable coin that Wally and Dave didn't realize they were in possession of, Eve instructs Kingo to take them around the corner and finish them off. Now, I do believe this part of the scene was filmed around this section of the block. The scene then makes its way down to the corner of Harrison Street and Staples Street, and it's here where Dave and Wally get the upper hand on Kingo, temporarily knocking him out. Once that happens, Dave and Wally take a beeline down Staples Street, which will bring us to the next location. This particular location was probably one of my favorite ones of the whole See No Evil, Hear No Evil filming locations, really because of the way it looks pretty much unchanged from 2026 compared to when they filmed the movie back in the late 80s. When Wally and Dave make it to the end of the block, they'll end up on Duane Street, and it's here where they borrow a police car, because the best thing to do when trying to get away from the cops is borrow one of their squad cars. The car will be parked in this area here, and Dave and Wally will sneak in with Dave sliding in the passenger seat because his hands are still handcuffed behind his back, and Wally will be the one driving. And once Wally gets a feel of the car, they're off and running. They make the left turn on Hudson Street as our tour begins on some of the neighborhoods in the west side of Manhattan. After driving down a few blocks, we see a pizzeria at the end of the corner, and I believe it's John's Pizzeria, and that's located at 278 Bleecker Street. And if you're ever in the area, go check out the pizza and let me know how it is. We're now at Barrow Street, and I believe this was one of the blocks used during the car chase scene. Now, I'm not 100% sure this was the actual block used, but when I stumbled on the block, it looked pretty similar to the block that was used when Wally and Dave were driving down with Eve chasing behind them. Let me know in the comments below if you think this is the correct block that was used in the movie. We briefly passed through the corner of Bleecker Street and 7th Avenue during the car chase, but it's also here where Kino actually jumps in the lead as the main car that is chasing Wally and Dave. The chase now brings us to the meatpacking district, in particular Washington Street and Gansevoort Street. And I believe it's on this block and this corner in particular where we seen Wally drive down the block and make the turn on the corner, but actually make the turn onto the sidewalk and end up on one of the docking areas for one of those meat packing plants and right into the area where all the meat was hanging. Now, the reason why I believe this is the location and the corner where Wally jumps the curb is because if you look when the car is approaching that first set of meat, you could see in the corner part of the screen the High Line. I also believe they filmed some of the car chase down the block of Gansevoort going down towards Washington Street. If you look at some of the buildings that were shown in the background during the car chase scene, they look similar to the buildings here. The final leg of the chase takes place at the Hudson River Greenway. Wally and Dave would cross over 10th Avenue and go into an open area where it used to be nothing but old piers, but is now a bunch of parks and bike paths. With the exception of the beginning of this portion of this chase scene, much of this area has totally changed and has been revitalized over the past 25 years, making it pretty much impossible to match up exact shots on where they filmed the rest of the chase scenes. But I do believe there was one area that was shot and they kind of just filmed it over and over again in that small section, and it's around this area here. The chase scene ends with Wally and Dave shaking off all parties that were chasing them by miraculously jumping on a garbage barge on its way across the river into Jersey. And that's where we're about to head to for our next location. We're now at the Days Inn in Ridgefield, New Jersey, and it's at this location where Wally and Dave were able to make a call and convince Wally's sister to come and help them out. When Wally's sister arrives at the hotel, she checks in a room, and shortly after she arrives, a bunch of cop cars come swarming the parking lot of the hotel, led by the two detectives that were questioning Wally and Dave earlier. They think that she is helping them out and meeting them at that hotel room. Now, when the detective enters the room where Wally's sister checked in, I do believe the door was around this section right here. And when the detectives enter the room, they find an empty room. No Wally, no Dave, and no Wally's sister. Now, the hotel has had some renovation done to it, so a lot of the way it looked in the film doesn't look the same as it did back then. But you could still kind of make out that this was the location where the scenes were filmed. The final stop on our journey today takes us to Father Demo Park, and it's at this location where a few of the scenes were shot in the movie. The first shot filmed at this location was earlier in the film, where we got to hear about Wally and Dave's backstory, and then later on in the film, actually the last shot, where we get to see them sitting in the park talking. And you get the feeling that their friendship has evolved over what they've just went through over the past day or two. But one thing's certain about this location: someone always ended up having an ice cream cone on their head at the end of the scene. See No Evil, Hear No Evil was released on May 12, 1989, and although getting generally panned by the critics, it did end up making a little under $47 million on an $18 million budget, which isn't a bad haul if you think about it. And like a lot of movies that got bad reviews in the 80s, this movie, through home media release, has ended up getting a fan base that has grown over the years. So if you're someone who's never checked out See No Evil, Hear No Evil, or even if you're someone who has seen it but hasn't seen it in a while, maybe you should go and check it out and see a couple of iconic comedians do what they do best, and that's make us laugh. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for coming along the ride and checking out the locations to this funny movie from the late 80s. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and also consider subscribing, where you can check out some of the older location videos that I filmed. And thank you again for coming along on this adventure today. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.